Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome, it is episode 45 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. My name's Catherine Eardley. I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for creative product businesses. You can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. So today we have a fascinating episode. I really loved recording this. Khaleelah Jones is joining us. She is the founder of Careful Feet Digital and an expert in all things to do with digital marketing, in particular content strategy, as well as SEO or search engine optimization. It's a really fascinating topic that I personally have spent a lot of time and mental energy trying to grapple with in my business. I know it's challenging or something that a lot of product businesses find it hard to get their head around. What we wanted to do in this episode was really touch on why it's so important and give you a few pointers on how to get started. I came across Khaleelah Jones through the Hatch Enterprise Accelerator program, which I've been part of, their Female Founders Accelerator. If you've never heard of Hatch Enterprises before, I definitely suggest you go check them out. It's an incredible program. It's very affordable for everything that you get. Khaleelah did a session in the Accelerator all about digital marketing. And as soon as I heard her talk, I knew I had to get her onto the podcast because she has such a wealth of knowledge and such a great way of explaining these concepts. So I hope you'll enjoy the episode. Even if SEO is something that you think to yourself, I'm not really sure about, hopefully this episode will convince you why it's important and give you some tips on how to get started. Welcome to the podcast, Khaleelah. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to kick us off by just telling everyone a little bit about you?
Yes. Hello. My name is Khaleelah Jones. I am the founder and CEO of Careful Feet Digital, a full-service digital marketing agency. I've been working in digital marketing for longer than I really care to say, over a decade. And my kind of areas of expertise or core focus are all around content marketing, search engine optimization, both the technical and then more content-related side of things.
Fantastic. And that's obviously what we're here today to talk about is search engine optimization. So one of the things that happens when I mention SEO, or we talk about it within my community, the Resilient Retail Club, or with clients, is that people tend to start getting quite nervous. Mm-hmm. So in your experience, how do a lot of small businesses find SEO?
Yes, I work with small businesses day in, day out. That's really the niche that Careful Feet Digital has cut out for itself. So I spend a lot of time in these discussions with small business owners who really are trying to adopt a digital first business model and be found on digital. And so SEO obviously comes into the conversation because being found organically in search engine ranking results is really tantamount, obviously, to then that strategy of being digital first. But what always seems to come up is how overwhelming SEO is. It's not super straightforward like social media marketing or even paid advertising, where it's just like an exchange of money. There are so many different elements when it comes to search engine optimization, from highly technical, going in and, making sure that your site is mobile optimized and that it runs faster and that you're editing the HTML, to just writing a blog post that I think that a lot of people wonder, well, where do I start? And is there such a thing as doing just a little bit that will work? And what should the priorities be? So it can often feel, I think, for small business owners who maybe are doing a lot of this stuff or quite a bit of it on their own, to be this like murky black box of digital craziness.
That is such a good description. I really relate to this because I've spent a lot of time over the last 3 years working on my own SEO and thinking about my own SEO. And I feel like I'm getting there. I mean, I certainly would never describe myself as an expert, but I feel like I have a better understanding. And my experience would always be that someone would explain it to me and I would go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then I would try and implement it. And I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I love the murky black box of digital craziness. I think that is such a good description. I think one that a lot of people relate to. So can we just talk for a moment before we kind of get into, where do you even start? Can we talk a little bit about why is it important? Why should people be spending time on their search engine optimization as opposed to, for example, social media marketing? Or I mean, I know it's not an either or, but like, why is it important?
That's such a good question. So I always describe digital marketing as an ecosystem. And just like any healthy ecosystem, one thing really does depend on another. And if we take as an example, just social media and SEO, if we look at the way that people use social media, which is often, particularly for retailers, as a validation metric, is your business legitimate? Are people actually buying from your business? And, maybe some information about where things are made or what exactly it is that you offer. Then the next step, oftentimes, it depends on the demographics that you're targeting, but oftentimes will be, well, let me go find them online. And interestingly enough, it might come as a shock, but a lot of people are not just clicking on maybe a product directly from social media marketing. A lot of times they'll go and actually Google you. And so that is very important. But if we also think about just cutting that out for whatever reason, people are not using social media. This is particularly important if your target demographic skews a little bit older or even a little bit younger, because obviously with TikTok, people might find out about your brand, but then they need a way to get to your website, right? To make purchase.
Yeah.
You really need to be able to be visible. And then if we look at it from the other side, where I work with a lot of clients who are like, well, I'll just skip SEO completely and do paid advertising. But with paid advertising, you're paying for people to come to your site or to buy something. Wouldn't it be great to invest the time and over time not have to pay? And that's really the trade-off that you have there. So if you think of this as like a healthy ecosystem, SEO is really kind of the linchpin that draws everything in together, because it also is helpful in terms of how people actually are engaging on your site. So that's also very important as well. A big thing that I think that people think about is SEO is just keywords, but it also is people's activity and experience on your website. So if you don't have a great website experience, then that can be very, very problematic, right? And not just for, people bouncing off your page or not being able to find what they need, but also for SEO. So really trying to think of it as this part of an ecosystem, not just using one particular tactic, but using all of them as kind of things that are in your back pocket is super, super important.
There's so much here. There's so many different pieces here, but I love this idea of the ecosystem and the fact that that explains a lot, because one thing that has always slightly baffled me is when I look at, for example, my Google search console, then the most searched term that leads to my website is Resilient Retail Club, which makes a lot of sense now you say it, because it's like people see you on social media and then the first thing they do, and that's true. I suppose that there's a lot of the time when I see a business I'm interested in, I will Google them. I won't necessarily go from social media directly. I'll just kind of want to have a look around. And so it's bearing that in mind. And then, the fact that they all work together. So you've got to be discoverable in other ways. And to your point as well about paying for people to come. So paying for that traffic, especially a lot of what I talk about with club members is about profitability. Then obviously paid traffic is part of your strategy. If it's the main part of your strategy, then that does start getting trickier, especially if ads costs fluctuate and things like that. Whereas SEO, it's free. It's free traffic. And the other thing the stat that always sticks in my head as well is that 50% of all online purchases start with a Google search. So it's also that intent is so different, isn't it? When people are searching on Google for something, it's because they're looking for it. Whereas on social media, they may be very much have different agenda to be on social media than them shopping. Whereas when they're Googling, long sleeved black dress, like that's what they're looking for.
I always think about things not only as an ecosystem, but coming back to the funnel, right? And so social media is very top of funnel, right? You might be either just bored, like scrolling, or you might be looking for inspiration or like you're at the very top of the funnel though, right? But if someone is Googling a very high intent keyword, that means that they're already like much further down in the funnel. They're considering a purchase or even like have the intent to purchase. So I think that that's always something to keep in mind. Although you can obviously write blog posts and things too, that then if you optimize them can get people at a higher level of the funnel as well. So I'm sure that lots of retailers use interest-based keywords. So for example, if you're selling like toothbrushes, like the 10 best toothbrush types for sensitive gums or something like that, that obviously is getting somebody at the very top of the funnel. But the other great thing about that is that you can reuse that content for things like social media, and it's elevating you on your search engine rankings. So again, all these things come together and fit so nicely.
Perfect. Okay, so now we've convinced each other of just how important it is. And I just think it's worth saying it again because it is reasonably complicated with, or as you said, there's lots of different elements. It's not so much that it's complex, but there's just lots of different pieces to get your head around. I do think it is important to emphasize why people need to be thinking about SEO, because it can often, I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, it can often end up on the bottom of the to-do list.
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to people feeling very overwhelmed about having to create content all the time. I think that people put off the things that feel, the heaviest on their to-do list. So I've definitely heard that. And also I definitely understand that it takes a lot of effort to write high quality content. So totally get it. Totally get it.
So then if somebody is listening to this podcast and thinking, okay, all right, you've got me. I have been neglecting it, avoiding it because I don't get it, or because social media seems it's easier to grasp, or just because I'm very busy and I've got lots of other things to do. So what would you suggest, or where would you suggest that people should start? And actually going back to the question that you mentioned at the beginning, is there such a thing as doing just a little bit, or kind of what are the basics?
So I think that one thing that people tend to do is jump into this digital sphere that we find ourselves without having clear goals of what they want to get out of it. So I think that one thing that I make it sound easier than it is, but it does not require that you go out and start writing blog posts or even get into your website backend. But one thing that you can start with right away is to really identify what it is that you want to get out of your digital presence. And then you can start to basically prioritize really how important SEO is. So for example, if you want to make 75% of your sales through digital marketing channels, then SEO presumably will be more important than if you're only looking for 10 or 20% of your sales to come through digital channels, just as an example. And if you do have a good idea of what you want margin on your products and sales to be, and you want to have a fairly high margin, then again, SEO probably will be more important because you wouldn't want to likely be spending so much money on ads. So there are some just examples of like thought exercises that people can do. And then the next step to that, which it doesn't sound like this is SEO, but it really is making sure that you have analytics set up. So a lot of people will probably be using something like Shopify or some kind of out-of-the-box solution. And that's really great because they have great tutorials about how you can set up, for example, Google Analytics, which is free, and connect that to your Shopify. And therefore you can get data that you can pretty much immediately take action on, things like very high level, how many people are coming to your site and how are they finding you, to even based on where they're finding you, for example, social media or an organic search, what percentage of those people are actually purchasing. So again, this helps you essentially look at, are the goals that I'm setting for myself, am I meeting them? And then from there, and only after you've done those two steps, which I feel are fairly attainable for pretty much anyone, after that is where you can start to think about, well, if I, for example, I'm trying to rank more highly because that makes sense for my overall business strategy, and maybe I want to invest more time into this. But I think that rather than just feeling like you have to bite off everything and try and chew and swallow it, maybe take little bites and do so very intentionally. And only after that be like, oh, okay, I feel comfortable that this is actually, there's a reason for me doing this because it will help me get to my goals.
That's a great point. So once you've got those goals and you know what you're working towards, you don't just feel like that SEO is just something that's on your to-do list and you just have to kind of do it because you've heard it's a good idea. You've actually got a goal, and that's so true about analytics. And it's actually incredible, really, the amount of free stuff you can get from Google. And the other thing I'd say about analytics as well is that the analytics training that Google themselves do is pretty comprehensive and it's completely free. So it's not like, again, you have to pay to get analytics. You can have completely free analytics and set it up so that you can see that answer those questions. How are people finding you? What are they searching when they find you? All of that information. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's really great. And I think that the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the way that Google reports behavioral things, so things like the bounce rate on your website or the pages per session, meaning like how many pages on your site does someone navigate to once they've opened your site on their browser before they click out of it. All of that, those are actually stats that Google and other search engines take into consideration on an SEO side. So those are kind of the more technical, that's the more technical side of SEO. So that's really cool because you can start to look at things through that SEO lens and start to look at things like, oh, I have a very high bounce rate. Maybe my, website isn't mobile optimized because, for example, 70% of my traffic comes through mobile. And if lots of people are bouncing off, there's got to be a reason why. Or something like, I have lots of people who follow this particular path on my website. They're going from a product to a blog. Well, that's great. You can maybe optimize your site a little bit more for those kinds of behaviors. So I think it's also interesting to look at that from the perspective of Google is looking at my site and actually making ranking decisions based on the same data that I'm looking at. And that can really empower you as you start to prioritize what it is that you want to be doing when it comes to SEO.
Oh, that's such a good point. And so bounce rate, for anyone listening, bounce rate is the percentage of people that land on your website and leave without doing anything else, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you have a high bounce rate off your homepage, the chances are people, because I always stress this as well, is you have split seconds when somebody lands on a website that they're going to decide if they stay or if they go. If, say, 80% of people are landing on your homepage and then leaving straight away, then the chances are then they're just not seeing. Well, I think often with homepages, is it clear what you do? I've seen websites where there's a beautiful photo of flowers, but unless you're a flower shop, you need that first image, that first thing that people see to say, this is what we do, come in, see more, right?
First impressions are extremely important when it comes to the digital landscape. And that goes for, things like how quickly your site loads, because you have 2 seconds before someone's like, I can find another site that loads faster too. Yes, to your point, do I understand what this is that this person is offering me? And oftentimes, is this meeting my search intent? So depending on what someone Googled, are you answering whatever that query or intent was? If not, they're going to be like, this is not what I signed up for. I don't want this. And they'll jump right off.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. So Google will basically not show as many people your website if it finds that everyone it does show your website to immediately leaves, because they'll make the assumption that it's not a good search result. It's always worth remembering that Google's intention is to serve up the right website for people. So it's looking for signs that your website is not the right website for those people. So if your bounce rate's high, then it will say, yeah, maybe I won't show this to so many people because they don't seem to like it.
I think of Google as the biggest customer service tool in the world. If you think of it in that way, I think that's very helpful, particularly for retail and e-commerce businesses. Google wants people to use it and to stay on it because obviously it wants to take over the world, right? And so if you have a website that gives people good customer service, you are helping Google, right? Because you are helping to further people's great experience using Google. But if you do the opposite, then exactly, Google's going to say, okay, this site is not helping us further those objectives of getting people to continue to come back and Google things on our search engine. So you really need to think of it in that way. Is this site basically helping Google further those objectives. And I know it sounds a little bit strange to think of it in those terms, but I think that if you do, and you think about your own search behavior and the things that you would and wouldn't like and the experiences that you would and wouldn't like on a website, that really, I think, supersedes any kind of fancy schmancy technical audit or something that you can do using your own experience and pulling from that, because we all are digital shoppers, right? I think can be really powerful.
What's so beautiful about that is that actually what's good for Google's good for your customers, right? So if your customer likes it, then Google likes it. So if you do stuff that Google likes, then your customer will. It's kind of like, it's like both. It works both ways. So doing things to make it better for your customer will make Google happier, and then they'll show you more traffic, and it's all a very much a virtuous cycle. So and that's the great thing about thinking about SEO is it almost goes beyond just thinking, right, I've got to figure out my keywords and I've got to figure out, if the website is technically optimized for SEO. It's more than about thinking about what's good for my customer, which let's face it, that's what all websites are supposed to be doing is making it better for the customers.
Yes, exactly. That's what we all want.
So then what's the kind of next step? So we talked about you set your goal, you've set up your analytics, you've got a really clear idea about what you're trying to do, and you've got an idea of how you can measure it. What would you suggest as kind of a next good step for somebody on their SEO journey?
So the next step is starting to kind of figure out what is a better option or kind of route to go down. One is more of the content-facing route, and one is more of the technical route. So if you're looking at your analytics and you notice that you get very little traffic from organic, or you have Google Search Console and you notice that, for example, you get lots of traffic coming to your website because of branded search terms. So you mentioned earlier, actually, that you have lots of traffic coming to your site because people already know your brand, but maybe your ambitions are to get people who are not aware of your brand to come to the website. So you need to maybe use non-branded keyword terms such as, I need help setting up my e-commerce store,
yes,
or I need, retail marketing assistance, something like that.
Yeah.
Those two pieces of information can really lead you down very different paths. So one, if you're not getting a ton of organic traffic to your site, there could be one of two issues. And I am simplifying this, but very high level. One is that Google cannot actually index your website. So it can't actually crawl it and index it. And that would be technical issues of a technical nature. Mm-hmm. So things like, is your sitemap optimized? Is your robots text optimized? Things like that. And we've been talking a little bit about the technical things like mobile optimization, all of that. And that's becoming more and more important to Google. Mm-hmm. The days of just putting a keyword 1 million times on a website are far behind us. In fact, this month, May 2021, Google has released something called the Core Web Vitals update. And essentially, this is just reinforcing that people's experience, that user experience, is a core part of SEO. Right. So that's one side, kind of the more technical side. Can Google actually essentially look at your website, quote unquote, read it, and then serve it up to people in results? The other side of this, though, is if it looks like you're getting a good amount of traffic, but you take a look at those keywords and you think, there are changes that I would want to make in terms of the types of keywords that I'm focusing on, that's a little bit more on the content side. So it's going back to your data and trying to parse out, well, what does this data mean, and where are things a little bit more weak? Is it more in the numbers of traffic, like the sheer traffic numbers, or is it more in kind of finessing how that traffic comes to me and how they then are converting? Again, I've kind of grossly oversimplified this. So I just want to mention that if you are interested in reading more on this, the Moz, M-O-Z, I was going to say Z, sorry, super American. The M-O-Z blog is very good at breaking down these kinds of topics and really explaining them probably in a much better way than I can. And then also the Neil Patel's blog has a lot about this as well.
Okay, fantastic. I'll put those in the show notes for anyone who wants to find out more. So there's basically, it's kind of the technical bit, which is almost like basic hygiene for your website, right? Because if Google can't find your website, then that you need to get that fixed, like, ASAP. But I suppose the good news is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but would you say that the technical fix is something like that would be far simpler in a way than a content strategy, because content strategy is more of a long-term project, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how big your website is, and kind of the good/bad news is that retailers tend to have lots and lots of pages because you have lots and lots of products. That obviously gives you, more options to rank sometimes. Yeah. But depending on how often you're creating new pages, that might mean that you need to do technical reviews more frequently. But yes, a technical audit is a little bit more, even though it requires technical expertise, I would say a little bit more of a check the box exercise. Mm-hmm. Whereas obviously a content audit requires quite a bit of, I suppose, strategic thinking. And coming back to that funnel that we already discussed, having kind of thoughts and thinking such as, well, if I want to drive completely new traffic to my site and get people at the very top of the funnel, what kind of content should I be creating? Versus if I want to get people who are looking for, black vintage Gucci dress on sale, like that shows you that person really wants to buy that. So what is your strategy based on where people are in the funnel? And also thinking through, particularly if you're getting people at the very top of the funnel, how do you get them to keep coming back? So there's a lot more there, I think, that you can dig into. I think that both sides can be overwhelming because a lot of people don't have technical expertise, right? So that's one kind of, can of worms. But I think that once that's taken care of, you have this reasonable expectation that, okay, at least my site can be crawled and indexed. I think that the content strategy and audit is a little bit more of an ongoing task and requires a bit more just, you got to sit down and really think on this kind of stuff.
Well, thank you for I know that this is a big topic. I mean, you could probably do sort of a whole series of podcasts there are a whole series of podcasts just on SEO. So thank you for sort of giving it to us in a nutshell. I guess what I just want to kind of wrap things up with saying, just to kind of give people a sense of how long does an SEO strategy. So let's say you listen to this podcast and you've not done anything on your SEO. So you can at least start with the basics, like setting up your analytics, getting an idea of what you want to do. And then, as you say, once you've got those analytics in place, you can then start to get a sense of, right, is this a technical issue? So I need to, I think probably fair to say with SEO, it is one of those things that you may well have to get some expert help with at some point, unless you are super technically minded and you want to sort of teach yourself. But what do you think about the kind of the hybrids as well? Things like where there are plugins or there are things where you could get sort of some assistance with your SEO, where maybe something else could crawl your website and give you some pointers.
Yeah, so there's lots of good tools, and most of them have a free version, to my knowledge. So tools like Screaming Frog, which will do quite a bit of the technical crawl for you. Mm-hmm. You'll probably need to Google around so you can understand the results that it spits back up at you, like what's a 404, for example. But that's something that's helpful. Tools like SEMrush, which we use at Careful Feet Digital, or Ahrefs, which help you do quite a bit of the content research. And I believe that there are free versions of these. And then, as you mentioned, plugins. So for example, if you're using WordPress, for example, Yoast is a great plugin. Yeah. Shopify has SEO areas in the very CMS, in the very content management system part of the tool. So there definitely are things like that. And also, obviously, for out-of-the-box solutions such as Shopify and Squarespace, they do try and take care of some of the more technical features like the sitemap and robots text for you. Yeah. So yes, I do think that those can help you get a fair way down the road. What I tend to see is things like the templates that people select, particularly for Shopify, WordPress, Wix, these out-of-the-box solutions. Those can sometimes override or supersede the HTML and the way that things should be presented. So for example, it may make it so that Google can't read your page the way that it would ideally be able to read it, which is a technical problem, but obviously makes it difficult to rank for keywords if Google can't read your page. So right. It's helpful to be mindful of the limitations of some of these things, but I do think that can help you, particularly at a very early stage, get a leg up. And then as you start to scale and grow, and again, coming back to your business strategy, if SEO is a big part of that, then I think that it does help to get someone take a look and just make sure that you're not leaving any stone unturned or, any money on the table, as it were, that you are really wringing all the value out of what you have as possible.
Fantastic. And just give us a little sense of, this might be one of those, how long's a piece of string, but I often say SEO is more of a long-term strategy. So what is sort of typical time frame to start seeing some results from your SEO? Because it's not really overnight, is it?
No, it's not like ads where you turn them on and, they will come kind of thing. Provided that there are no technical blockers. So we always say with clients, provided that either a tech audit has been done or you feel comfortable with the technical side of your site. If you start to really invest in a content strategy and really start to push with that, you'll start to see ranking results within 3 to 4 months usually.
Okay.
So that's something, of course, that it does. Sometimes it is a little bit of a, Pollyanna, like this is just right kind of thing. But yeah, usually it is between 3 to 4 months if all other factors are well.
Fantastic. So just to kind of set people's expectations, but this is the thing I always say, future you will be so happy you spent that time doing SEO 6 months, 12 months down the line when you start seeing really good, decent organic traffic that is high converting because they're searching for what you're selling. It's just so important to make a start. And even if, you don't see much for return right away, I just think as well, it just avoids putting all your eggs in the social media basket. It's, of course, Google has algorithms, but, ultimately it's about, they're about getting people to find your website if your website's right for them. So it's great thing to really explore. Well, thank you so much for that. It was really fascinating as always. I feel like I could talk all day about this. It is it's a subject that I have spent a lot of time thinking about for my own business. So I find it quite interesting. And I know as well, I have clients who have had really transformational effects on their business by focusing on their SEO and being able to reap those rewards, again, not immediately, but further down the line. So I think it's just such an important thing for people to at least start trying to get their head around. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about where we can find out more about Careful Feet Digital?
Yes, if you Google us, we've done our job. Careful Feet Digital. You can either do that or our website is carefulfeet.me. And you can also find me on Instagram. If you can spell my name, I always ask my mom, why did you get my name? But I'm probably the only Khaleelah Jones on Instagram. So you can also find me there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. I feel like we could have kept going for a lot longer. It is a big topic. We really only scratched the surface, but hopefully it's given you some food for thought and some ideas of how to move forward. Why not come over, say hi on Instagram at Resilient Retail Club. Let me know what you took away from today's episode. How about you share a picture of where you are when you're tuning in? I always love to see those. And let me know, what did you take away from that? Are you already working on your SEO? Is there anything here that you're going to do as a result of listening to the podcast? It's always so interesting when people reach out and tell me their thoughts about the episode. If you have a second to rate and review the podcast, that would mean a huge amount to me, and it is so helpful when it comes to getting the podcast out in front of more people. And of course, if you subscribe, then you will be the first to know about the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.